All right. Ladies and gentlemen, why don't we begin? Good morning and welcome. My name is Vlad Zhirinovsky. I'm the president and CEO of Craner. We are a wealth management company. And today with us is, I'm actually very happy to say, is a very close friend of mine and a crazy Devils fan, just like I am, Mr. Mark Milbrod. So Mark is Mark joins us from the Agent Support Group. He has over 29 years of experience in the insurance industry, and Mark began his career with Prudential as a district manager. Later on, he moved to MetLife, where he led the marketing division and support of agents similar to the way I am right now. Being part of ASG, Mark is actually an internal consultant for Craner. So when we receive cases and we review them, Mark participates with the years of experience that he has reviewing life insurance policies, long-term care, disability insurance. He gives us his opinion on how we need to proceed and what it is that we need to do. And I also wanted to share that Mark has been featured speaker at numerous events. He and I actually attended an event together in Las Vegas in January. And also Mark is a chartered life underwriter, and the designation he received from the American College. And like I said, Mark is a very, very close friend of mine. So the purpose of today's webinar is planning under the Secure Act. As you know, last year, the Congress passed a new law which revolutionized and really made some pretty drastic changes to the way things have been done. One of them, for example, is the required minimum distribution had to be taken out in the 6 months following you turning 70 and a half. However, now that age has been increased to 72. And there's a number of factors why this happened. One of the biggest ones is the longevity. Another piece, and Mark will jump into this to discuss with you further, is the fact that stretch IRAs, which basically meant that any money in your retirement accounts left to your beneficiaries, you were able to extend that money over the lifespan of the beneficiary. Well, ladies and gentlemen, no more. That has been limited to only 10 years. So you can imagine a family with leaving $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million to their heirs. Those heirs would have to systematically withdraw the money, and that will increase the financial burden on those families, on the beneficiaries, because they'll have to pay income taxes on their own money plus the taxes on the inheritance. Now, you could be asking why this has taken place, and one of the main reasons is the following. We are going through the largest wealth transfer in the history of this country. Baby boomers, the earlier generation of baby boomers born in 1946, are beginning to pass the money on to their beneficiaries. Well, our government, obviously, and you can see with $25 trillion in debt, and now adding $3 more trillion in debt just because of the pandemic, our government needs money. So we always try to stay not ahead of our government, but at least to be able to navigate the new laws that are being implemented to take as much of your money as possible. And our job is to help you protect your money as much as possible. So without further ado, I would like to turn this over to Mark, and please kick it off.
All right, Vlad, thank you very much. You can see the screen, correct?
Yes.
Good. Okay, great. Well, just want to say thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity, and thank everyone who tuned in today to listen to our brief webinar today about planning under the Secure Act. One of the things that I want to do first, let me just make sure we're working here without a glitch, which it seems like our first glitch came in. Okay. For any of you out there that have any family, friends, or yourselves are on the front lines, I just want to take a brief moment to thank everyone for your service, first and foremost. Very important. And we can move on now and kind of move on to the crux of what we're doing today. Over the last couple of months, we've all learned about Zoom as a way to communicate with everybody. And if there's one thing that we've learned is that, there are two different versions and different ways of doing Zoom. Obviously, we can just do audio. And we've learned that if we have an audio call, you don't have to do much to prepare for that. but we've learned also that when doing these video calls, you really have to make yourself presentable. So when doing these Zoom meetings, it's important to kind of follow those little Zoom etiquette rules. So we did that. Let's move on. So Vlad gave a pretty good overview of the Secure Act a few moments ago to kind of set the stage for what we're going to be talking about today, which is this new Secure Act. What's interesting is this was the biggest news that hit the financial world back in December. And with the COVID crisis coming into the forefront, this kind of took a back seat. But it's still there, and it's still a great planning opportunity. So we'll give you a brief overview in a minute. I'm going to talk about what is most important to everybody who's on this call today, and that is what Vlad mentioned. Our job is to show you techniques on how to minimize the tax hits that you would experience under any kind of new law out there. So we're going to show you where the possible planning opportunities are by talking about a bunch of different types of techniques that we've come up with. Well, as a kid growing up, this little guy would look familiar. This is Bill. He was part of the old Schoolhouse Rock TV show that was on, and I always got a kick out of Bill and Bill wanting to become a law. So I thought it was kind of fun to throw him in here to add to this presentation. But the Secure Act was actually, it was a bill that was signed into law by President Trump on December 20th of 2019. And it stands for, like everything they put out, always has an acronym for something, setting every community up for retirement enhancement. So that's what it actually stands for. So why the Secure Act? Well, first and foremost, it is the most significant retirement reform that we have seen in over a decade, first and foremost. And to put it into perspective to see why this is so impactful, that in the year 2019, there is something like $30 trillion in retirement assets on the books in the United States, and 18% of which are in traditional IRAs and what we call defined contribution plans. So this is where the opportunity really arises. So what the Secure Act did was this. It increased retirement savings by employees. Number one, that was the first driving force behind it. And it motivated businesses to offer more retirement plans in general to the wide range of employees out there. But why did they come up with this to begin with? And the answer is, we have a troubled retirement system. There are issues that are in the forefront. And what's going on is we've all heard stories about Social Security, and that remains an issue because a lot of folks will say to us that, oh, I don't even know if that'll be there to protect me down the road. But sadly, Social Security is one of the major and one of the only things that people have in their portfolios that don't have someone like a Vlad to help them along with private planning. So the Secure Act was needed to stimulate this private retirement planning. And only 55% of the adult population that has an opportunity to participate in a workplace retirement plan does. So the government's trying to fill the gap with these four areas to make sure that there is something in the background to make sure their retirements are protected. So here's some quick highlights about the Secure Act and what it really was intended to do. Number one, for small business owners, it was designed to set up a safe harbor, we call it, safe harbor retirement plans, which are less expensive and easier to administer for them. One of the biggest highlights was we talk about RMDs, or required minimum distributions, that you're kind of forced to take out from your plans to basically start taxation of your deferred assets. That was age 70 and a half. With the Secure Act, it was moved up to 72. But it's also important to note that this year, with the CARE Act that took effect recently as a result of COVID, there are no required minimum distributions in the tax year of 2020. The next thing it did, it allows for part-time workers to be included in retirement plans, and allows traditional IRA owners indefinite contributions. And what that means, a lot of people are not retiring at normal ages right now. And prior to the act, they had to stop making contributions at a defined period of time. Now, as long as they're still gainfully employed, so if any of you are still working in your late 60s and early 70s even, you can still make contributions to an IRA. And the last thing, it allows 401k plans to offer annuities, which was not something that was previously available. But today, we're going to concentrate on the planning opportunities, and these planning opportunities are going to revolve around something that Vlad mentioned before, and that is there used to be a provision that if you wanted to leave your retirement assets to any beneficiaries, that you could extend the taxation over their lifetimes once they inherit that money. Well, with the stretch IRA provisions that changed through the Secure Act, you only have now a 10-year window to take the money out of that for a non-spousal beneficiary. So if you have children you want to leave money to, or grandchildren, or whomever who's not a spouse, you have 10 years to empty that account. Essentially, the government is looking to get a speed up, if you will, on getting their money, which they want, which is the taxes on that bucket of money, and not allowing you to stretch it out indefinitely anymore. So the planning opportunities, the next part of this presentation, is going to talk about some techniques that we use. And we all know the adage about the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg. Well, all the details lie underneath the surface. And we're going to talk about all those planning opportunities that are under the surface for you. The opportunities that we're going to be speaking of today are going to revolve around a series of products that we have available in the financial world. The first product we're going to talk about are annuities. Annuities are a very widely used financial instrument out there. We're also going to talk about life insurance and possibly a combination or a hybrid approach. But anything we're going to talk about today, we're going to be focusing on one thing and one thing only, and that's leveraging your dollars to maximize the potential of your planning opportunities. So the key to the planning opportunities revolve around those new stretch provisions or lack thereof. Now, like we said before, maximum now of 10 years to non-spousal beneficiaries. And we're going to talk about something called a non-essential qualified asset. And what that means is very simple. A lot of times we have clients that have different buckets of money that they want to use for retirement assets. A lot of times they have retirement assets that they don't necessarily need all that money or some of it to maintain their lifestyle. And that's why we're going to call this non-essential qualified assets for the purposes of the next bunch of examples we're going to show. And all the opportunities that we're going to show are very close to being hit. If you have the right situation, on top is someone who's furiously going after these opportunities. Let's call him Vlad on the top part of the screen, going after the opportunities. And down below, there was someone who was trying to get to those opportunities and gave up too soon. Well, Vlad's the guy on the top that's going to help us take full advantage of the opportunities and the diamonds that lie beneath. So our first opportunity we're going to talk about is something that we call the annuity crock pot. See, annuities are a very interesting product, and what they do is they allow you to take your money and put it into very safe vehicles with no market risk whatsoever. So if someone has an annuity, we're saying that you can take a lump sum of money, put it into annuity, not have to worry about that segment of the money being tied into the market, and it'll guarantee an income for you going forward. That's one opportunity that we want to talk about by using some of those non-essential assets or essential assets for that matter. And we call it a set it and forget it crock pot approach of putting some of your money into these safe annuity vehicles. So that's our annuity crock pot opportunity number one. Number two is something called the Q-Life stretch or qualified life stretch. What we're doing here is taking dollars that were in that non-essential qualified bucket of money, and what we're going to do is we're going to use that money, the income, to purchase a life insurance contract. And you can either purchase it on your own life or a combination of two people if you're married which will give you more death benefit, ultimately going to heirs. And what it does, it creates from a taxable bucket of money, which was this qualified money, it's going to create a tax-free account that will go to your heirs, and it could simply outpace other types of investments you may have. And granted, these types of plans are not the only thing you should have, but it could be part of an integral financial plan.
Mark, may I jump in for just one
Sure.
second? I think the lingo in our industry is pretty diverse and different from the way most people communicate. I just wanted to clarify that when we talk about qualified money, we talk about your retirement accounts, your IRAs, 401k plans, 403b plans. So that's what we're talking. That is literally what is qualified. Non-qualified means your regular average accounts, your brokerage accounts, investment accounts that have nothing to do with your retirement. And I don't mean your air market for retirement. I physically mean a particular type of investment account that's not 401k, is non-qualified, and 401k and your pensions are qualified. Just to jump in and clarify something.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, and I apologize for not pointing that out before. So we're going to look at what we're talking about. In our example here, we're using the example of $500,000 in a non-essential qualified or 401k IRA bucket, okay? And this is 100% scalable. We're just using that as a round number. So what we're trying to show here is that if that money was taken and we took it in its entirety, that we would turn into an annuity product that would give a guaranteed, in our example, a 10-year guaranteed income. In our case, it's over $54,000 a year from the $500,000. And like I said, this is totally scalable to, it could be $200,000 for that matter. And for a 60-year-old who's interested in this type of transaction, they can actually turn that $500,000 into $1.5 million of a tax-free life insurance death benefit. And for a 65-year-old, if we go down one notch, it's $1.2 million. And even a 70-year-old, it doubles that $500,000 almost into a $935,000 tax-free bucket of money. So that's kind of the principle we're talking about here. This could be done. Sometimes you don't have the ability to include two people, but you have for a female and a male, you get more insurance for a female because they live longer, and based on statistics. And some will argue that the old joke is about men and women, married couples. They say, why do women live longer or why do men not live as long? Is because the men had enough at that point. So we look at the next example here. If we took what we call a survivorship life policy, which basically puts two people on a same insurance policy, but instead of paying a death benefit upon the death of the first insured, it pays on death only of the second insured. And because they stretch out the death benefit until the second person passes, as you can see, the leverage that we're getting is much higher. You can get for two 60-year-olds up to $2.3 million of life insurance benefit under that scenario. So all we're doing here is trying to leverage those dollars from those IRA assets and to do something else with it that can get more money to the heirs and significantly increase the rate of return to those heirs on a tax-free basis. So we're taking a taxable asset and turning it into a non-taxable asset just by taking a financial instrument like a life insurance contract and using it to your advantage. The next thing we'll talk about is essentially the same type of thing, but with one little twist to it. A lot of folks are concerned about what happens if they get sick later in life and we've all must have heard the term long-term care insurance. And that essentially will pay for care if somebody gets sick down the road and they have to go into a nursing home facility or get care at home. The policies today that we're looking at have a multiple tiered approach to them, where not only does it have a life insurance benefit, but that same life insurance benefit, if you need to use that money to pay for long-term care expenses, you're able to multi-use that life insurance benefit that can now be used for a long-term care benefit. And what we're doing is, once again, it's about leveraging. We're taking those tax-free those taxable dollars, and turning them into a tax-free life insurance benefit or money available for a long-term care event if needed, also tax-free. What that essentially does is protect your other assets from being invaded if you needed to draw from those in case of a health event down the road.
And Mark, may I jump in quickly
Sure.
to indicate something? Over the past few years, as we became obviously more and more aware of life expectancy really extending rather substantially. I mean, you yourselves, everyone participating on this call, when you hear someone is 80 years old, you're like, yeah, okay, they're 80 years old, right? Like, even you hear someone who's 90, and we have plenty of clients in their early 90s, and they're very coherent people. They drive, they go shopping. Well, not right now with the pandemic.
Not right now.
And one of the things that we were adamant about is, these are not added costs that we're discussing. This is simply strategy to just repurpose your money. And I'll use an example of one particular client in a case that we worked on. She had $200,000 in a savings account. She was thinking about investing money, or where and what should she be doing. She's in her late 70s. So we put together an illustration where we take the $200,000. It's not, you can contribute money annually or monthly or lump sum. We were able to extend the $200,000 into about $275,000 in the benefit amount that her heirs would receive if something happens to her. So already $75,000 more. But if she needs to utilize that money to go into a confinement care facility, then we were able to take that same $200,000, and we leveraged it, meaning we increased the capacity of that money to about $325,000. And instead of her qualifying for only 25 months in a confinement care facility, we were able to extend it to 50 months.
Right.
50 months. And we made her more money just by simply repurposing the money that was sitting in her checking account, in the savings account, I'm sorry. So that's what I wanted to just quickly share with all of you.
Exactly. And the key term you used there, Vlad, is repurposing, because a lot of times we talk about these types of plans, the long-term care specifically, and it's like, oh, it's too expensive. Where do I find the money? And often cases, just like your example, we're not looking for more money. We're just looking to kind of repurpose and move something from one side of the equation to the other. And just by that word you use is perfect, that repurposing approach, we accomplish so many goals and solve so many problems. And just so you know, you don't have to be confined to a facility. These plans allow for home care as well. And if we've learned nothing else from this whole COVID crisis that we're currently in, is that these nursing homes have been the hardest hit. So making a solid plan now to make sure you can provide care at home is probably more important than it was in terms of the notion of that 3 months ago, because you have the ability, by having a nice robust policy, to have this money just in case you need it, to provide that care at home and keep people out of nursing facilities, basically. And I think that's one thing that'll come out of this the most, in my opinion. So you have the ability to do that. So this is what it looks like when we take those numbers on the left-hand side here. Let's pick on our 60-year-old again. $1,275,000 of guaranteed life insurance benefit, never to change. But the most important part is, if we shift to the right-hand side of this for a moment, the potential monthly long-term care benefit you can get, in my example here, is $25,000. And that comes out to 2% of the $1.2 million, which is represented on the left-hand side. So it's a direct correlation to the amount of death benefit that you receive. So it's important to know, even for a 65-year-old, the potential is to get over $20,000 a month of long-term care benefit if you need it. So it's just knowing these tools exist and how to use them properly and how to repurpose assets. So that was our Q-LTC stretch. Our fourth planning opportunity is something a little bit different, where I call it the G2, or the Generation 2 stretch. In the previous examples, we're talking about taking the monies from this non-essential qualified bucket, the IRA, 401k monies, and using it to put insurance and annuities on the life of the generation one, or the parents in my example. But the whole point of a stretch to begin with is to get the money to the next generation. So here's a notion that we came up with. And what we're doing here is we're going to use the life or lives of grown children. So we're going to take the money from that same example before of the $54,000 of income in our example, and we're going to split it between, in my example here, two grown children. I have a son age 34 and a daughter age 31. And what we're going to do here is we're going to gift the money to them so we get it out of our estate. And by the virtue of what we're going to be putting the money into, we're creating this family bank, which is essentially life insurance contracts that have cash value with them and death benefit for the benefit of the families of generation two, or the children of the grandparents. Let me show you what it looks like real quick. On the top part of the screen, I mentioned they have two grown children, son 34 and a daughter who's 31. I take that $54,000 and I split it in half. So I'm applying $27,000 through a gift to the son, and he's going to purchase a $1,038,000 contract, which is represented top left-hand portion of the graph. That's the initial amount of death benefit they receive. Most important here, these contracts we're selling are 10-pay whole life contracts, which is the kind of contract that we would recommend in these situations, that has the lowest death benefit and the highest cash potential. So a guaranteed cash value by year 10, as you'll see, is about $246,000, almost what you've put into it. By year 20, the guaranteed cash value is $345,000. And at age 65, if this keeps on growing, the guaranteed basis is $493,000 of guaranteed cash value. And down below in the red column is the corresponding numbers that have dividends being paid, which are not guaranteed, but you can grow it beyond the guaranteed values with some degree of dividends over the years. And we're showing the death benefit growth as well. In year 20, in the bottom column, the bottom row actually in the middle, that $1,038,000 has grown to $1,005,000. And by age 65, it's over $2 million. Did the same thing for the 31-year-old daughter, and we get a little bit more bang for the buck there. And if we look at the composite of both of these things, we've now taken this $500,000 of non-essential asset, and we're going to create our own stretch, regardless of what the new regulations say through the Secure Act, and we're going to get all that money out on a tax-free basis and provide all these benefits to that generation two, which is the children of the parents. That's a great technique to use. And look at the growth here. Guaranteed cash values by age 65 of over $1 million. Total cash value with those non-guaranteed dividends of $2.1 million. And the death benefit will grow all the way up to $4.6 million. Not too bad from this stretch of $500,000 of money today, that we're leaving our own stretch technique to future generations, which will ultimately be used and can be used for the grandchildren of the parents here. So that's kind of interesting. And this approach, just so you know, we use this as well when, let's just say, the parents were not insurable due to a medical condition of some kind. This is very popular there as well, because we can then shift the money over and put the insurance on the generation two, or the children of the parents in this case. And the last opportunity is something very interesting that we've been using a lot of lately, and that is something that we call an ROP, or return of premium stretch. Plain and simply, how it works is this. We're taking the money in our example previously, and in this case, I'm going to round the numbers up. $50,000 of income that's coming from that annuity we purchased, the 10-year annuity, guaranteeing those 10 years of payments. I'm taking that $50,000, and once again, this is totally scalable to smaller amounts or larger amounts, into something we call a guaranteed universal life contract. We're purchasing $1 million of death benefit, but the twist here is every dollar of premiums that goes into the product is going to increase your death benefit every year as you put more premium dollars in. Everything I'm going to show you on the next screen is 100% guaranteed. There's zero market risk, and the death benefit, is, like I said, is going to increase each year by the premiums paid. And the rates of return are dramatic. Let me show you what I'm talking about. For a male age 60 who qualifies for this guaranteed universal life contract of $1 million, each and every year they're going to have their death benefit increasing by the amount of premiums put in. And what that's doing is, if we look at the example here, by year 10, the death benefit is automatically grown to $1.5 million, which is the sum of the premiums that were paid into it. And look to the far right, the red numbers. By year 10, the internal rate of return on a tax-free basis is almost 19%. Year 20, 7%. And by year 30, when this client is 90 years old, it's still over 4% on a tax-free rate of return on death benefit. It's a pretty powerful approach that we're using, because a lot of times we talk about life insurance being used in planning scenarios. What happens is people say, well, I get nothing for my premiums going in. I'm just putting the money in. In this case, your death benefit is growing by the amount of money you're putting into the contract. And what we're doing is we're taking, if we're looking at it from the total satellite view for a moment, we're taking this $500,000 that you had initially, which was a taxable bucket of money, and we're now going to add that to the life insurance benefit and get that $500,000 back on a tax-free basis on top of the normal death benefit that we were purchasing. So these are all just different techniques that we wanted to show you. And obviously, we can't go into every detail to keep this under the half-hour point, but Vlad and I can work on putting more customized approaches together to show you how this could work on a customized basis and a scalable basis for you based on the numbers going in. Because like I said, that $500,000 can just the same be $200,000 or $300,000 and so on and so forth. And what's interesting to note is that everything we're talking about today, the insurance industry, number one, has responded very well to the whole COVID crisis. And we get a lot of questions about, is my life insurance going to be paid in case something happens? And the answer is yes. There are no pandemic exclusions in these policies that you're purchasing. And even further, the insurance industry has taken this one step further, and they have said today, a lot of the things we're talking about, normally you would have to go and take a physical exam. They'll take blood from you and have a physical examiner come down to you. A lot of times, even up to the mid-60s now in age, we can accomplish this due to the insurance company's ingenuity, getting these insurance policies in place today without even having a physical exam. And there are ways they figured out a way to do that by doing database searches and so on and so forth. And in some cases, even accessing your medical records through portals that most doctors and hospitals have today that have your records in them. So important to note that we can still do these things today, even though we're in this social distancing world that we live in. And Vlad, anything else before I go to the next slide that you want to jump in on?
No, just the simple fact that the insurance companies were able to utilize this particular time and really making things a little more available. You know, where before we had to get a technician to come out to do the vitals on any policy just about that we work on. Now things have become a lot easier.
Right.
And we can avoid having anybody come to your home. All of this can be done via telephone. The applications can be mailed, but you know, obviously we're here to answer any of your questions.
Right, and something else I want to add, though, which was not part of the initial presentation, was there's a lot of concern right now about the market, as we all know, and you know, there are some dips here and there. The insurance also can be used as a portfolio recovery plan. So in case there have been some changes in portfolios, for example, or just changes in general, I mean, incomes might be dropping. there are ways to pick up very inexpensive forms of just a 10-year term insurance policy for time of recovery on a non-medical basis to make up for shortfalls in case something happens to someone in the next 10-year period of time. We're doing that a lot lately as well. Just want to throw that in there to put in this, we call it the portfolio recovery planning. It's something else I wanted to just add. So with that, if there's nothing else though that I've learned about this, this crisis we're in, anytime a crisis shows up, just go get that toilet paper. It's becoming one of the most important things out there. So Vlad, anything else, any questions that came in or anything else you want to ask or throw in there?
So yes, obviously, of course, please feel free to call us with any questions, but we do have a question. So I'm trying to understand the new regulation. I'm 54 with young children. Does this regulation mean that if something happens to me today, my young heirs only have 10 years to withdraw the money? Do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, before the act, like we mentioned before, if your intention is to leave the money to a non-spouse or your children in that example, you used to have this unlimited time to stretch out taxation. Now it's 10 years. So if your intention is to do just that, or in some cases where I have divorces of people in their 50s and their beneficiaries of their retirement plans are their children, okay, that becomes an issue. So you need to make arrangements that all you'll have is 10 years to get the money out of that account if that's the arrangement that you do have. So if you do have non-spousal beneficiaries, because currently with Secure Act, your beneficiary, if it's your spouse, can still receive the money without issue. But the minute you bring in the fact that you have a non-spousal beneficiary, 10 years is going to be the maximum amount of time you have to take the money out. And it does not have to be done systematically over 10 years. You can wait, as far as I understand the regulation, to the end of the 9th year. As long as you get it out of there by year 10, you're okay.
Excellent. Okay, we do have another question. So from the example that we utilize, if we take $200,000 and repurpose it into long-term care / life insurance, and what happens to the money that's not used up?
Okay. So if I understand the question correctly, let's just say I had a $200,000, I'm going to call it a total pool. And that pool is multi-purpose. It could be life insurance and or long-term care. So if I understand the question correctly, if let's just say of the $200,000, I received $100,000 as a long-term care benefit, if that's the question, then upon death, there'll still be $100,000 left of death benefit payable to the beneficiaries as a life insurance proceed.
Excellent. I think that's the gist of it. Whatever you don't,
you don't lose anything is the bottom line, and that's a major distinction. In the past, you know, there are traditional long-term care policies that people have purchased throughout the years, and if anyone out there who's listening to this has had one of those types of policies, you probably have experienced over the last several years rate increases. Those products still today do not have a guaranteed premium structure. So by shifting over to these types of hybrid plans, you're able to guarantee the premiums will never change. And plus the fact those old contracts, if you had them and if you never went on a long-term care claim, it's basically a use it or lose it approach. At least with the hybrid policies that have the long-term care riders on them, if you never go on long-term care claim, you still have that lump sum of life insurance benefit going to the heirs ultimately. It's an important distinction to make.
Very good, very good. We have another question. The question is, Ken Fisher's commercials on TV all the time, right? They have negative ring to annuities, right? High fees, underlying difficult choices, unable to access your money. Mark, so that's the question, right?
Right.
Like, what's your opinion? And I would like to add something else.
Yeah.
You spent 29 years in the industry. You work for prominent insurance companies.
34 years.
34 years, sorry. So from your perspective, what would you share with our viewers right now about your experience with annuities overall?
Okay. let me preface the answer by saying that I'm a very firm believer in one adage, is that no one product or vehicle is going to be the right thing for everybody. Okay, so let me just throw that in there. So that being said, my view of annuities is something that annuities are one of the most misunderstood products out there, plain and simple. And the Ken Fishers of the world, when they come out and make those statements, they're talking about a very specific type of annuity. And there are different types. The ones that I'm talking about and the examples we've shown are designed to have nothing more than a guaranteed income. There's no levers on them. There's nothing that's going to change the performance of them. These are strict fixed products. And the ones that Ken Fisher may be referring to are the types of products that are tied into the market and have volatility tied into them. Different products altogether, and nothing should be lumped into one general basket. Just like there are many types of funds that someone can choose from with you, there's managed funds, there's all different types of balanced funds. There's no one type. Same thing with annuities. So my view on annuities is that if you incorporate annuities into a properly designed retirement portfolio as one piece of the puzzle, and I can use that piece to guarantee income that'll never stop for my lifetime, no matter how long I live, that's a good thing. And I can put contingencies in there that'll say that if I never get to the point where I receive all my payments because I'll pass away previous, we always put provisions in there to make sure that income continues to a named beneficiary to at least the amount you put in, if not more. So my view is that there's no one product that's good for everybody. And I'll sit with, out of 10 clients we sit with, I might not make a recommendation for an annuity for half of them or more, depending on their situation. So when you put it all together and you put it as part of a financial plan, annuities are a fantastic way of guaranteeing income, and that's what we're trying to do so people do not outlive their life expectancies. Because it's nothing more if somebody receives a pension. A pension is nothing more than an annuity payment.
Right.
A Social Security payment is nothing more than an annuity payment. So a private annuity you purchase could have the highest guarantee rate of anything else you have. So don't put the stigma attached to an annuity. Just think it's a bad thing because of bad press, because there's an old expression out there about the devil's in the details. Same thing with anything we read. You have to understand what he's talking about and the fact that it's not the same type of plan that we're talking about.
Great. Thank you for that. We have another question that came in. I have a long-term care policy from about 9-10 years ago. Is it still good? What can I do with it?
Well, that needs to be reviewed. A lot of times, if you bought this policy 10 years ago, did you say? Over 10 years ago?
Yeah, about 9-10 years ago.
A lot of times, obviously you're 10 years younger. A lot of times there are features and benefits in those types of plans that you just can't get anymore because the market has changed so much. So we might recommend that you keep what you have just because it might be something that is just still good in this environment. Even if you had increases in premiums, it might still be very good compared to what you can get outside. Now, that being thrown out into the mix, it's important to say that we would love to review that. And maybe it's not providing all the benefits you need. Maybe the solution is keep that and buy something else to make up the gap of what you do need based on your needs. And does that current plan provide everything that you need in terms of benefit? And the only way for us to make that evaluation is to simply look at it. And that's what we do on a daily basis, review contracts. And oftentimes we'll make recommendations, just keep everything the way it is, because it's not always about generating something new. It's just about reviewing what we have, just like we review our auto and homeowner policies every year. Right now, I just had a phone conversation with a friend of mine who's a mortgage broker. He's the busiest he's ever been, refinancing, always looking at different things out there. And as you know, Vlad, you're reviewing portfolios on a daily basis. Life insurance, annuities, long-term care policies are financial instruments that most people tuck into a drawer, forget about, and never look at it again. It's always worth taking a look and looking under the hood. Correct.
That's to add something on the personal side, there's time and time again when we our existing clients, well, with existing clients, we obviously review everything regularly. But when we're introduced to a new family and they start taking out policies from, 15, 20 years ago, something they've taken out when they were in their late 30s and maybe
Right.
40s, many of them, companies are no longer in business, have been acquired by somebody else, so the contracts don't even, the contracts still exist, but there were new companies. But you need to review things. Like, it's
Right.
not set it and forget it type of scenario. Things change every single day. Who would have thought? Even with this pandemic, we celebrated my wife's birthday on March 8th in New York. Well, her birthday is March 7th. March 8th was celebrated her birthday in New York. And then in the middle of that week, the whole country was, well, the whole New Jersey and New York were in complete lockdown, right?
Right.
In like 4 days. So just know that obviously there are options, and we can review and give you our honest opinion, and we'll compare it to what's out there.
Well, also, to that point, though, Vlad, some of the things also, what I just said about the long-term care policy that the question came in on, there are so many different changes in the insurance industry over the last 3 to 5 years alone, that if someone has an old policy, it's just that, it's old. And there are innovations in products. And let's face it, when you buy an insurance policy, let's call it a life insurance policy, when you were in your 30s and you had young children, the goal there was to make sure you had income replacement, to make sure if God forbid something happened to you as a major breadwinner, that there'd be insurance for your spouse and children to carry on. But as your children grow and your mortgage is paid off, which might have been a motivator to why you bought the insurance to begin with, to pay the mortgage off, as your kids grow and they're out of college, let's say, your needs change. So that policy you bought 15 years ago when your children were young is not going to accomplish the same goals today. So to go back to your term of repurposing, we look at different products today, and you might have an old policy that has cash value in it, for example. We can utilize that money and repurpose that into a newer product, because now your needs are, wow, I really should look into long-term care. Maybe I can find a product has life insurance, maybe less life insurance, but has more of an emphasis on the long-term care, like we showed in one of the prior examples. So as your needs change, it's important to look at the old contracts you have to see if we could subsidize new products and leverage with your old contracts into your new needs that are now here that weren't the same as they were 15, 20 years ago when you bought your insurance to begin with. So it's important to know as your needs change. Now, like I'm saying, people in their 50s and above should be looking into long-term care protection, and that's the biggest need change that we see today. And it always pays to review current coverages for sure, to see it as something that we could do or suggest there to build in some of the new innovations with new products out there.
Very good point. Ladies and gentlemen, please, if you have any questions, we'll allow a couple more moments. We do want to be respectful of everyone's time for joining us on this call. Anything else that's of any importance to anyone on the call? Okay, great. So as always, I'd like to thank our guest speaker, Mark Milbrod, for joining us in sharing some planning options and things that are important to all of you, and the way the CARES Act has changed the way we will look at retirement. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on the call. We have recorded, and we will make the copy of this video available towards the middle of next week, so we will resend it to you. Please feel free to share this with your family and friends. Believe me, there are many people who are not following this, and unfortunately, if you don't know what you don't know, that can harm you. And as always, I'd like to leave you with thank you for allowing us to play an important role in your success. Have a wonderful day, and good luck.